ask that all press put their questions in the chat. We're going to have the attorney speak, as well as some of the family members, and then we'll go into the question and answer portion. Once I see your questions in the chat for that portion, I'll call on you in the order that I see them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Burris. I'm here with Ben Essenbaum. We're here to announce that we have filed a lawsuit on behalf of Kristen Hart and her family in reference to Kyle Hart, who was shot and killed by Redwood City police officers a while ago. To us, this case is very hurtful in one sense, is that it redefines or reconsiders, reiterates, if you will, how mentally impaired people are treated by local law enforcement. And in situations where family members call for help because their loved one is suffering under mental crisis, we have seen far too often that when the police arrive, instead of de-escalating a situation and taking control of the situation, they wind up killing the person, and killing them under circumstances that are highly questionable. And this is a situation where Mr. Hart was suffering. His wife had communicated to them that, but yet the police did not have a plan to de-escalate. And as soon as they saw Mr. Hart, who was
recording in progress,
they in fact shot and killed him. And so we're very disturbed by that, and we have filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court here, alleging that not only his civil rights were violated by the excessive use of force, we also have filed, as part of it, a claim on behalf of his wife and his children, because they also have suffered and will continue to suffer as a consequence of this shooting and shooting death that's taken place. So we are here because of that. And as by way of background, I can only point to you and show you a couple of things here so you'll know. We do not have a video, which is unusual these days, but we don't have one. But we do have just a schematic drawing that we have here of the layout of the yard and location where this took place. As you know, this took place in Redwood City. This is the layout of the house. The incident, the shooting death took place in the backyard of this house. And there the officers walked up through the gate. The wife met them here. Kirsten met them here. They walked up by themselves. They went through this gate password, you will, and they then saw Kyle, who was up here at the top, back toward the fence. He walks down there. The officers then, within a matter of moments, he was shot and killed. This incident, it was maybe 20, or not even 30 seconds from the time they get word in the backyard here before they, in fact, shot and killed him. The more disturbing component about this is that the officers did not even take an opportunity to put together a plan, just a real small plan that would say, we have a person who's suicidal. We know that he is armed with a weapon of some kind, a knife, because of it. How do we de-escalate this situation? How can we bring proof, safety, if you will, to him without having to use deadly force? And unfortunately, we have officers who apparently just panicked and had no idea of what to do. Either they were not properly trained on how to deal in a situation where a mentally impaired person was present, or they ignored the training. These were young officers, for whatever reason, who responded here, but who did not act in any kind of way that suggested they had experience in addressing themselves as a person who was mentally impaired. And that's the tragedy of this, because it would not have taken very much to calm the situation down, and Kyle would be alive. And that's why we're here, because we cannot stand, we cannot allow for this kind of treatment to occur with a mentally impaired person. You cannot, in our view, for our family members to call for help, ask for help, and that the help that arrives is dangerous and ultimately kills the person. So there's no justice and no that we can accept there. So we have filed this lawsuit Hopeful that we will be able to deal with these issues within that department, but also enlighten the general population that there's a method that should be employed when dealing with mentally impaired people. And we know some cities are doing a lot of work on having mobile units to respond. There's units that are now responding that may not necessarily be law enforcement. All of these are things that are being developed now. Unfortunately, they should have been employed at the time of Kyle's confrontation of meeting with the police, but they were not. And as a consequence, he is dead. And we are now going to go forward with the lawsuit to at least bring some sense of justice to his family and to the very issues that Nessenbaum from the office. He will talk some, and then we will have the family, and we will answer any questions.
Thank you. I can only imagine the pain that a family member must feel. You call the police for help because your husband is hurting himself. He's not threatening anybody else. Nobody else is in danger. The police arrive, and I'm sure you feel a sense of relief, immediate relief. The people who are supposed to know how to handle this are here. Less than 30 seconds after they arrive, 29 seconds after they arrive, one officer unleashes 5 rounds, killing a person who was no threat to anybody but himself. How is that acceptable in this day and age? All police officers are trained in how to respond to mentally impaired people, how to respond to potentially suicidal people. And Mr. Hart had actually cut himself at his throat. And the officers saw this. Mr. Hart was alone in his backyard, no threat to anyone except the officers. So it's a very simple thing that the officers are trained to do. 1, create space. 2, don't compress the time. How do you do that? By creating space. Talk softly, don't give commands. Now, one officer did attempt to use a taser. She was about to use the taser again when Officer Gomez fired his gun. Well, we're not saying the taser couldn't be used. We are saying the gun couldn't be used. This shooting was totally unreasonable at the time that it happened, but all the tactics, everything the officers did leading up to it, they created a confrontation. They're the ones who are responsible for their conduct. In all the depositions I've taken, every officer tells me that they've been trained that they should not be the ones who create the conflict, that they should avoid doing that. So how else do you explain this? There's a way to approach a person, there's a way to talk to a person, and police are trained to do that, especially a person who is suicidal. If that person appears to be intent on approaching you, then what do? You change your location. In this case, the officers have obviously a path where they can move backwards. Do they take it? No, instead they shoot the person. So that to me is totally unacceptable, totally unreasonable, both at the time that the shooting happened, as well as all the tactics beforehand. They're young officers, but it's no excuse.
You know, part of the issue that I see here is seemingly not understanding that it's okay to reassess and to back up and to move to a position of safety where you can then get control of this situation. It was clear that Kyle was in his backyard. There was no one else in the backyard. And so it's very easy to have stopped there at the gate, waited, have some communications with him, either through his wife or bring someone else in who was fully capable of talking. All of which could have been done. Time, distance, space, reassess. All could have been done, and none of it was. Instead of fools rush in, as they say. You know the old adage about fools rush in where wise men dare not tread. That is the unfortunate component of this. So let me do, before we take questions, I'd like to bring Kristen. She has a statement she would like to read.
Thank you. My name is Kristen Hart, and I am Hart's wife. While this lawsuit is about Kyle's death, I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about Kyle's life. Kyle was the rare person who could strike up conversation with anyone he met, from waiters at restaurants to the awkward tween at our family events. Kyle was kind and truly interested in the people around him. He was always ready to lend a helping hand. This was part of what made him an excellent teacher and friend. He was completely unself-conscious, always the first one to show off his bad dance moves at a school assembly, or ask a million questions while trying new things. He loved being outdoors. He was a surfer, sailor, biker, and snowboarder. Kyle comes from a service-oriented family with generations of Bay Area firefighters. But Kyle had a passion for teaching middle school, history and English. He especially loved helping his students expand their worldview by learning about history and making connections to the world today. Kyle was known for having his classes mix concrete when studying Rome, putting on Shakespeare plays, and making sushi while studying medieval Japan. But what he really loved most was getting to know his students and being a mentor for those who needed one. We met in college in 2005 and married in 2013. He was my best friend and a wonderful husband. We made the most of our summers traveling and camping. We're both teachers. He was down to earth and very caring. He loved to make me homemade pasta, and we enjoyed listening to summertime concerts in the town square. He was a truly devoted father, the kind that's in the pool that, at baby swim lessons, and a regular at the neighborhood park. He taught summer school so we could save, and we bought a home in Redwood City in 2018. Kyle grew up in Redwood City and loved his hometown. We hoped to raise our children there, and he wanted to be involved in shaping the growth of that city. Unfortunately, those dreams were not to be realized. Kyle became very ill very quickly, and on the morning of December 10th, he was harming himself with a kitchen knife. He was not a threat to me, our 2-year-old son, or our newborn daughter. He loved his life and did not intend to die that day. I called 911 for help, as we are trained to do. Instead of giving us help, the police arrived with guns drawn and shot him in our backyard. In the minutes after the shooting, the officers had no regard for Kyle's dignity or medical needs, nor did they have any concern for myself or my children. Kyle died without the comfort of his family near him. We did not get to say goodbye. I don't know who they thought they were there to serve and protect that day, but it was not my family. In the following months, we learned that Kyle's cause of death was homicide due to gunshot wounds. Some may ask why I'm filing this lawsuit now, over 2 years after his death. It has been a long road here. I am not filing this lawsuit only for monetary damages, although that is important. Kyle's rights were violated and he is dead. My family has suffered great trauma, and I am now a single mother raising 2 young children in a very expensive area. Ultimately, though, I believe that the city, department, and officers should be held accountable for Kyle's death. Thus far, there has been no acknowledgement that mental health response is an area where the police even need to improve. What I would love to see come out of this is a comprehensive approach for how Redwood City Police respond to a person in mental crisis. Proper equipment and training are part of this, but must be based in a culture that truly values all people, no matter who they are. Leadership must communicate this value and enforce it within the department, and be transparent with the public. Over the past 2 years, we have talked with the city multiple times in pursuit of our primary goal, which is for the city to make changes to ensure that what happened to Kyle does not happen to anyone else. When the city proved unreceptive, we attempted a formal mediation, but we were not able to make any progress, leading us here today. Kyle was a sick person in need of help, and rather than provide the help that they are trained to give, the police killed him. Kyle deserved better. The citizens of Redwood City deserve better. Kyle will be forever missed by our family and his community. Thank you.
Any other family members?
Anything else? Okay, if there's any questions, then I'm out here to answer them, and our family. Okay, in the chat room. It's time.
Is there anything in the chat room, Ty?
No.
Here it is.
So yeah, we'll turn to Aldo Toledo now. Please unmute yourself and ask your question, Aldo.
Unmute yourself.
Yes, Aldo Toledo with the Mercury News. Just wanted to know the name of the other attorney who spoke, Mr. Burris.
I'm the one with the unpronounceable name. But my name is Ben, B-E-N. Last name is Nissenbaum, Nisenbaum.
Great. Thanks so much.
No problem. It's a common issue.
Any others?
Anyone else who wants to, you don't have to put your whole question in the chat, but just let me know that you'd like to ask one and I'll call on you.
Okay, well. I don't see any others, you think?
There's one more question.
Okay. What do you
Go
get?
ahead, Aldo.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you guys, if you guys have received any notice from the city of Redwood, city of the police department or anything like that. If you've communicated with them yet about this.
We haven't, have not personally, but I know before we became involved with this matter, there was considerable discussions taking place between Kristen and the and her attorney at the time, and I think that they were working through some of the areas that she mentioned here earlier, but really to no avail. We have not had any communication with them about this case at all, but that's not atypical either, so.
For us.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
We certainly will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Anything else, can you see? What is it? Look like A, isn't it? No. Okay.
That was all the.
All right, well, anything else?
There's one.
Go ahead, Christina, and ask your question.
Are there any specific changes that you want to see in the lawsuit with law enforcement in Redwood City?
Well, from my perspective, I think that the movement that's taking place now in many cities around California is that that the police are not the first responders when there is a mental health crisis at hand. And some are doing that through mobile units, where we have not professional people who are sociologists, psychologists, and individuals with that kind of experience to be the first responders. And I think that if nothing else, that is certainly one of the things that we would like to see here, is that police officers who are operating as traditional police officers should not be the first responders. In a case like this, where it was pretty clear that it was a significant mental health crisis, that a person with real experience in dealing with those kind of issues should have been present. Because even we know this, that when you have a situation like this with a mentally impaired person, you don't yell and scream at them and tell them to drop something. You try to first have some communication with them and calming the situation down, to let them know that you're not there to harm them. And unfortunately, when you have guns present and drawn out, you create a hostile environment. And so our feeling about it is that there should be another approach, and that this county and the city should really have different units that are non-law enforcement designated, trained to respond to this type of crisis. That doesn't mean that there should be some present, because there may be an issue of weapons, but they should not be the first responders. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to see happen here, if it's all possible. Now, a lot of discussions take place around CIT units now in different cities, but they're not uniform in their approach. And an appropriate approach here would have been that it shouldn't have been law enforcement officers with guns pulled out, should not have been the first contact that Kyle would have seen at the time he was within his crisis. That's what we want to see, at the very least. That could go a long ways to saving people's lives, and I see that. Now, there's other areas we have not gotten involved in terms of really taking a closer look at. We haven't had access to the policies and procedures. But I do know, though, that I just mentioned is a serious area of discussion, and should have some aspect of it should be implemented, where it should not be officers first, law enforcement officers with guns drawn should not be the first responders to a situation where a person is mentally impaired, particularly if they're suicidal.
And one thing about that, 988, we want another phone number to call. So that when people are facing a crisis that involves a mental impairment, or a person in an emotional crisis, a person who might be suicidal, who simply needs help, that people can call 988. You know, not 911, 988. This is a mental health emergency. Send the right people who are trained, because these officers, obviously, if they were trained, then they ought to be fired, because they totally violated all the training.
Okay.
So the next question is from Madeline Beck of the San Francisco
I'm
Examiner.
sorry, I just had a follow-up
Oh,
question.
sure.
Real fast. Can you talk a little bit more about Kyle's mental health? I mean, it sounds like he just had a breakdown all of a sudden. Did he ever had a diagnosis? Is that an accurate depiction of his mental status, that all of a sudden it just came?
The person who knows him best.
Kyle had been diagnosed with anxiety. He's been treated with a low level of medication, very common medication, for a number of years. Major components of his treatment were, occasional talk therapy, exercise, getting sleep. It was nothing out of the ordinary, nothing we don't all know, probably more than one person in our own lives that deals with. And it escalated very quickly. It's quite possible it was a reaction to his medication. He had been placed on another medication relatively recently. But again, it was another common medication. It escalated very quickly. And he had no history, absolutely no history of violence, and there was no indication that day of it.
Mental diagnosis,
Solely with anxiety. And he was because of the medication, he was under the care of a psychiatrist, because that's what you do if you're taking any kind of medication for your mental health. So he had a therapist that he had ongoing.
Can you describe what happened that day? What did he try to attack? He didn't attack you, I guess. He pulled a knife to his throat?
Yes. Cut his throat. Yes. He didn't speak. He was not aggressive. He was just harming himself.
Mental health, we've had cases coming off different forms. Sometimes people are trying to hurt themselves, sometimes they're just hurt others, but it's always something that if you properly talk with them, you can de-escalate that situation and calm it down. And that's really what professional people are. Most people really don't want to kill themselves, but they do need help, and they are crying out for help. And so we've seen that a lot. But unfortunately, when we're involved, generally, unfortunately, they kill the person, which is the worst outcome.
I'd also like to make sure, I'm not sure what was posted. We have some pictures of it.
Yeah, so here's, sorry about this.
That's okay. So his limitations.
Why don't you describe this in the picture?
So this is Kyle 3 days before his death at the hospital when our daughter was born. This is Kyle and our son taking some baby photos. And this is Kyle and our son when we took him to see Thomas the Train earlier that fall. well. He was at work up until his paternity leave started the week before his death. And he was caring for our son. This is not something anyone anticipated. Anyone in his life, his doctors, nor I, nor his family, who are here with me today, but you can't see due to Zoom.
So the next question is from Madeline.
Hi, I was wondering whether the officers who responded have faced any kind of disciplinary measures or whether an investigation was conducted.
Well, we don't personally know the answer to that, but I would imagine that they've been long since returned back to work. We certainly haven't heard any news that any officer was. We wouldn't hear if they were personally disciplined internally. That's obviously, you all know that's a police officer's bill of rights, and they keep those things secret. However, we will ourselves have access to all of that. Just during the course of the litigation, we will know what happened to them, what if anything happened at all, and what the plans are. So there's work that can be done here on a positive level. But we don't have any information about what actually happened to these officers, but I suspect not much.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have another question from Aldo.
Yeah, I just had a question about the previous negotiations that you had with the city and previous communications, I guess, in the past 2 years. What kind of response did you get from the city, and who did you reach out to? And I guess that's a question for Ms. Hart.
Yes.
Yeah, we've spoken over the past several years with their city manager, with a number of the city council members. However, the mediation went through their attorney. I can't say much about it, but we were not successful. There was not a productive conversation.
And in terms of when you spoke with some of those city council members, and did you ask them about some of the policy changes that they could make, and what was their response to you?
That sounds good. Some of the city council members are more interested in making change than others. They have committed to body cameras because we don't have film of this because they don't have body cameras. To my knowledge, I believe they may have been purchased. They are still not being used. So just even the very most basic, in this day and age, it is expected that body camera footage will be available. They still haven't even been able to implement that despite funding in the budget and grants that have been received. So, it's possible that recently they've implemented that and not let anyone know, but I find that unlikely. The county has implemented a program where mental health professionals respond to calls where that's appropriate, and Redwood City has recently begun participating in a pilot program. As we know, pilots end all the time. There's been no commitment to following through with that program, but that's a positive step. I think it's taken a long time, and it's small, and it was at the request of the county, not within their own department.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? If not, Jan, that's it?
No more.
Okay, good. Thank you, all of you, for appearing on our Zoom press conference. Thank you, and family, I certainly appreciate your participation and the questions that you're going to ask. All right, thank you. Let's go in the press conference.
Recording stopped.